Hello everyone, my name is KelSounds, and this is episode 4 of Faceplant Sound Design Utilities. And so far, we have gone over remap, lower limit, and upper limit. We have gone over scale, and today we're going to be covering sample and hold. And so just to do a quick recap, episode 1, when we covered remap, pretty much just allows you to be as specific as possible inside of this remap editor when it comes to modulating different parameters inside of Faceplant, or like say you have a macro knob, and when you turn it all the way to 100%, you only want your snap heap effect rack to be at 50% on the mix instead of 100%. Remap allows you to remap the values of the mix, and so that can be applied to any of the knobs inside of Faceplant. And so yeah, remap just allows you to be as specific as you would like. And then for lower and upper limit, those utilities allow you to clamp the values of an output of a modulator, such as this LFO. We have this triangle wave, and lower and upper limit are working together to clamp the values of this triangle wave, so we get this sort of like square wave instead. So if I go ahead and throw another lower limit in here, and then I modulate it, as you can see, if I lower down this threshold, it makes this sort of square shape instead of a triangle wave. So yeah, it just allows you to clamp your values. And then for the scale utility, that allows you to scale the output of a modulator by multiplying it with these values down here. So you have 0.001, 0.01, 0.1, 1, 10, 100, and 1,000. And so I used it on the semi-cent of 2 analog generators to get a sort of glide effect when the notes are playing inside of this MIDI. So yeah, it sounds pretty nice. Then if I go ahead and turn this up to 1 and bring this up, it'll be a more aggressive effect. But if I have it at 0.1 or 0.01, it's more subtle. And then now for the sample and hold utility. Before we go over this, I want to once again pull up the kilohertz documentation so that way you guys have a better idea of how this utility is working. Okay, so for sample and hold, samples a value from an input signal when triggered and outputs that value constantly until triggered again. Connect an input signal by sending as a modulation to the center graph area and the trigger signal in the same way to trigger their arrow. I think that might be a typo. Every time the trigger signal rises past the threshold, which can be changed by right-clicking on the trigger arrow, a new value will be sampled from the input signal at that moment. That value will be held and output from the module until a new trigger occurs. The modulation triggering functionality is described in detail in the triggering chapter. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and check that out, you can. It's just on the Kilohertz website, Kilohertz Docs tab, and that's where they keep all their documentation for all of their effects and modulators, generators, and pretty much everything about Faceplant. So yeah, it pretty much holds a value from a modulator. If I have my LFO here, and then for the output, I go ahead and modulate this sample and hold. I'm going to go ahead and use bipolar mode, so that way it's going above and below the zero crossing here. This arrow on the bottom here of the sample and hold is what triggers what value is going to be held. So if I go ahead and click that, as you can see, it holds the value depending on wherever this dot here that's moving on the LFO was at. So if I click it again, it holds that value. Then I go ahead and click it again, again, and again. And so yeah, it pretty much just holds the value of a modulator. And you can also come in here and trigger it with this threshold. And actually, you can also modulate the trigger as well. And you can actually do this inside of a random shape modulator. So if I go ahead and turn down the rate all the way to 0, and then I use this trigger. So this trigger is kind of the same thing as the sample and hold over here. I just click on that, and it outputs a different value every time I click on it. And it's going to keep it at that until I trigger it again. Then I can even use an LFO to trigger the trigger of the random. So many triggers. So if I go ahead and modulate this, it's going to output a different value every time the value of this LFO goes above the threshold of the random trigger, which is this red line here. That's the threshold. And so yeah, that's pretty much the sample and hold utility. So yeah, I would encourage you guys to mess around with this utility and yeah, just have fun with it, create something cool. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Adios.